12 o'clock on the dot. So we have people coming in right now. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Checking all my settings here. Make sure everybody can hear us. Hi, Chadwick. Thanks for being here. All right, well, there will be people probably trailing in, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in as we kick off our first session of the 2021 Virtual Speaker Series here at O'Neill Insurance. My name is Danny Kimball. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here, and it's just such an honor to introduce you to Pete Honsberger. He is the lead facilitator of CultureShoc and will be speaking today on Culture as Your Constant is the title of his presentation. But our team here at O'Neill Insurance, we've been working with CultureShoc for quite some time, and their team has really helped guide us through the entrepreneurial operating system, also referred to as EOS. Essentially, it's like teaching us to put our culture at the core of our business strategy, of our vision. So our partnership with CultureShoc has truly been invaluable. They're located in Westlake, and Pete is an instrumental member of the CultureShoc team. So we're excited to share him with you and for you to listen to his presentation today. I'm confident you're going to come away with culture-related tips and things that you can implement in your business. But through this presentation, if you have any questions at all, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A. I'll be kind of paying attention to that while Pete presents. And he is doing a Q&A, a brief Q&A at the end of the presentation too. So, but I hope you enjoy the presentation. And Pete, I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Thanks a lot, Danny. And thank you guys for having me and welcome everybody to this lunch hour opportunity for us to just have a quick conversation. I want to talk about culture. To me, culture is one of the things that we can control. When everything around us is out of our control, this can be our constant. So my whole presentation today is going to be sharing a couple tools and real life client experiences that show how we can control what we control and use that as a constant and make sure that we are intentionally keeping our culture strong, despite the fact that we might be all remote, partially remote, maybe everybody's slowly getting back into the office or the plant facility, whatever your context is, we think that everybody individually has an opportunity to contribute to your culture in a positive way. And so whether you're the owner of the company, whether you're in human resources, whether you're an intern, it doesn't matter. Whatever context makes sense to you, I want you to think about the rest of this talk in that specific context and perspective. So if you're noticing behind me, there is a picture of a buffalo. I apologize if you've heard this a million times, but if you've never heard it before, our company is CultureShoc. We are obsessed with this story of a buffalo, and it rolls up to everything we do for organizations. I'm a lead facilitator at CultureShoc. I facilitate team building events, training sessions, and training programs around communication, accountability, anything related to culture, as well as one-to-one coaching for our clients. But everything we do, like I said, rolls up to this buffalo mentality. And it comes from a story that says Native Americans say buffalo and cows act completely different when a storm comes. So imagine a storm coming across the United States. Buffalo as a herd charge directly into that storm. Cows either sit and do nothing or they run away from the storm. And when they run away from it, it follows them. And sometimes they can outrun it for a while, but eventually it catches up to them and they end up in the most amount of pain for the longest time possible. Buffalo who charge into the storm, it might be painful right away or even early on, but they get through it a lot faster. If they charge into it and keep moving, they get to the blue skies and the green grass a lot faster. What we do for clients is help them individually as teams, as leadership teams, have this mentality that if something is important or a conversation needs to be had or a decision needs to be made, it tends to be better for you if you attack that head on. Because even if it's difficult, you'll get through it faster and you can move on to the next decision, the next conversation. And over time, those things get easier and easier. If we kick the can down the road, sweep things under the rug, hope somebody else makes a move, it tends to get harder and harder. And by the time we end up having to deal with something by necessity, it's usually a lot bigger of a problem than it was if we had just attacked it head on right away. And these don't even necessarily have to be problems. They could be opportunities that you're looking to go after, new product or service lines that you want to experiment with or to test out, or potentially new employees to bring onto your team. So that's the Buffalo mentality for us. I apologize if you've heard that a bunch of times already and had to sit through it one more time, but I can't talk about it enough, because everything we facilitate rolls up to this idea of charging head on into things that are important, even if they're difficult, rather than kicking the can down the road. So today's topic is culture as your constant when our workplaces keep changing. And whether your workplace has stayed relatively the same or not, at the very least, a lot of your clients and customers are probably in some sort of flux. And just as we're leading our people through having a great culture, we can also lead our clients and our customers. And that's part of this whole culture thing is the idea of wanting to work with customers and clients and vendors that align with the same type of values and what you believe, just like you would for your own team. And just like our people are looking for our leadership, a lot of times we have an opportunity to lead our clients and lead our customers as well, not only providing more value to them, but also creating more trust between those two parties. So thanks again to O'Neill Insurance for having me on as the lunchtime speaker. I'm going to break up the talk right in the middle with a quick video that's one of the most inspirational ones that I watch on a regular basis. And I just want to make sure that during lunch, we're getting a little bit fired up since I know you've already put in a half day of work. So I'm going to break my presentation into 3 parts. We've got the organizational constants, things that you can do as a whole organization or as a leadership team, the individual constants, and then the process constants. So if we're thinking of culture, breaking down organization, individual, and process, that's how we're going to handle this. So I want to share at least 2 to 3 tools from each of these 3 parts. And I promise you're not going to have to remember everything. I'll gladly share this PowerPoint slide deck with anybody who's interested after the fact. But I'm hoping everybody in here has 1 or 2 things that you can jot down as you're listening to this that makes sense to you to actually implement either right after you get out of this meeting or sometime soon after. So let's get into the organizational constants. The first thing I have to say is to keep your culture constant as an organization, you've got to commit to your operating system. Danny mentioned O'Neill uses the EOS system. That's what we use internally as well. And that's what we help implement for a lot of companies. But that's not the only one that exists. The point is that when things are around you are uncertain, you've got to first commit to whatever operating system you have. And to me, an operating system is a strategy and understanding where you want to go as an organization in the near term, the midterm, the long term, or even as your department, if you're part of a larger organization. How do you operate? Where do you want to go? What are your strategy, your main objectives for the organization, for the department? And then the second part of that is how do you execute and stay accountable to executing and getting the things done that you say you want to get done? And then number 3 is communicating with people along the way, your meeting pulse, your meeting cadence. You know, how often does your leadership team or management team or department get together to communicate how we're doing and make sure that you're on track? So to commit to your operating system is critical if you want to keep your culture strong and keep it constant in these difficult times. So how do we keep people safe? That's an example of a question you might have to lean on your operating system for. How do we adjust accordingly if somebody has to go home for 14 days or can't even be working at all? What do we do in those situations? What we found to work and what a lot of our clients have seen to work, number 1, lean on your core values. If there's something in your core value about safety, about having each other's back, about quality assurance, about keeping a safe environment, about high standards, lean on those and make sure that if you haven't already, that you break down your values as specifically as possible so that you can actually use them in some decision making. Quality standards, discuss regularly. All right, that's part of the idea of an operating system, is that you have regular communication. So if you're discussing regularly, all you have to do is make that a topic to discuss, or as we call it in EOS, make it an issue, and then discuss it and solve it. And you can always bring it back onto the list if it becomes an issue again. The second question, or multi-part question here, that an operating system helps with is, when do we pivot? You know, especially in a year like 2020 and even now, you know, there have been a lot of necessary pivots, our business included. We're in the live events business, and live meetings, live team building events. live trainings, and a lot of that has had to pivot to different sort of channels and mechanisms. So understanding, when do we pivot? When do we add people? How do we know who we should add? And then unfortunately, in some circumstances, when do we need to cut some staff? So a couple answers here from our clients and what we've also done internally. Number one, determine thresholds. So if you want to pivot, determine how much revenue you think it's going to take to make that make sense. How long are you willing to give it a shot before you cut bait and do something else? Uh, Number two is utilizing your organizational chart to understand where you want to add people, what department needs people the most, and what is the right job description or the right set of responsibilities that you need somebody to take over. We call it in EOS an accountability chart, but it's an accountability chart just because it shares the 4 to 6 main accountabilities of each box on your org chart. And so if you think about the boxes on an org chart, if you're in a small to mid-sized company, you might be sitting in 2 to 3 to 4 different boxes because you share 2 or 3 or 4 different responsibilities. So the idea for that is one by one, we want to hire people to get ourselves as leaders out of as many boxes as possible so that we can be playing to our strengths or playing in our sweet spot or our wheelhouse, you might call it. And the last one is measure your progress and your success towards whatever it is you want to accomplish. So if you say that you want to pivot, make sure that you're saying whether you're on track or off track to actually getting to that pivot. If you say you want to add somebody, make sure that you measure, are you doing the things on a daily or a weekly basis to get yourself closer to actually adding somebody, or actually understanding, where the threshold is, and then giving yourself that on track or off track, or however you measure it in your own right. But just make sure that you're doing it on a regular basis. This is where an operating system is critical, in my opinion. If you look at, where do we want to be and where do a lot of times we think we are as far as an org structure, if you haven't really laid it out, the right side is where we think we are a lot of times, and the left side is where we really are. All these dotted line end around, I kind of report to this person, but that person, that person, that person. The key is to simplify your structure as much as possible. And that'll give you a sense and an inclination of where's the next spot that I need to bring into the organization. Where is there an empty spot related to a function that we really need right now or in the near future? And it also allows you to be proactive and to show people within your company that, hey, despite all the crazy circumstances around you, despite the fact that we're a half remote workforce or an all remote workforce, there's upward mobility here within the organization. There are spots that will need to be filled, and we're actively working on it as a leadership team, despite the fact that, maybe we're dealing with a lot more external factors than we normally would be. So this is also an engagement tool to show people, there is a plan and we're executing that plan. So I want to, throughout this presentation, I want to share brief client examples so that you don't feel like it's just me sharing ideas, theories, things that I've seen or heard. These are actual clients that we have that are working through issues related to these different constants. So one client we have is in aerospace manufacturing. Aerospace has basically cut 1/3 out of their business in 2020 because very few people are flying around the country. So they're not making as many parts. So number one, they lean on their operating system to commit to the hard stuff. All right. They got into the room together once a quarter as part of their operating system, and they discussed, here are the main issues that we're dealing with. Here's where we need to pivot to. And also, here's where we don't want to pivot outside of. That's number two. They refuse to move outside of their focus. The focus meaning what they are really good at. If at CultureShoc, we say we're an engagement firm, we facilitate training and team building and coaching and strategy. If we started offering payroll services, that would be outside of our focus. You could say, hey, that's an HR adjacent function that we could add, but that's outside of our focus. And just like a manufacturing company, if they started a restaurant and started serving cheeseburgers, that's way outside of their focus. So that's a challenge when you need to bring dollars into the door. Sometimes it's harder to actually stay within your focus than it is to try to be everything to everyone. But that's what an operating system and being intentional makes a lot easier. And then the third point is one that's easy to forget and really critical to remember, is that complex issues are still just issues to be solved. Even if it seems like it's very difficult or it's scary or it's outside of your comfort zone or right at the edge of your comfort zone, if we view every challenge or problem that we have as an organization as simply an issue, that we can break down into people taking action items against that issue. We can make progress on that and eventually solve those issues. So if we see something as this giant, overwhelming thing that we've never experienced before, that can be debilitating, and that can actually cut out our action or our progress towards solving any of that stuff. But if we see that as an issue that we can put on a board and talk about and then break down into smaller bites, it's a lot more palatable. So the next one I want to talk about related to an organization is this concept of strategy straddling, and the critical nature it is to avoid this. This is when you're sitting on the fence, you're dealing with something that's difficult as an organization, but you're just 1 foot in, 1 foot out, saying, hey, maybe we should try this, maybe we shouldn't. You have people doing endless assessments over whether we should do this. You make your quarterly goals to determine that. Then at the end of the quarter, you say, well, I think we need to continue to talk about this, blah, 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 blah. All right, that is something that will cause inaction within your organization. If you want to keep people excited, keep people engaged, and let people know that as a leadership team, you're actually making things happen, we've got to avoid this. And so we've got to get to the point where if something is a possibility, you've got to get as fast as possible to a heck yes or a heck no on this responsibility, or depending on your culture, a hell yes or a hell no. All right, if you can't say a hell yes, then it's got to be a hell no when it comes to these discussions. And a couple examples of that. One of our clients at the very beginning of the pandemic, they're in the beverage distribution business. They immediately decided, you know what, our people are going out and still selling beverages to different restaurants, and not so much restaurants at that time, but grocery stores, liquor stores, blah, blah, blah. Right? They instituted something called appreciation pay, where they paid a little bit more per week for anyone who was going out and about into the world when so many people were staying at home. They also made a very quick decision that no matter what we do, we are not laying off team members as long as we possibly can, but we might have to adjust compensation. And they communicated that to the team right up front. We have several clients and people that I've talked to, even friends and family members, who went through most of 2020 uncertain about, am I going to keep my job or am I not? That is very tough on a culture when there's just so much uncertainty. Some of it is outside of our control, but if you have the financial means, or as long as you're crystal clear with people up front, like communicating that decision is huge for a culture and to keep people engaged. The third thing they did, which I wanted to share, I just think is a great idea, is they service a lot of restaurants, and a lot of restaurants were shut down or takeout only for a long time, and some still are. They purchased thousands of dollars of gift cards to their customers' restaurants and stores, and gave a lot of those to employees and other clients and vendors as a thank you and as a, hey, we're going to be here to support you. We want to help you out. So that was one client example from a strategy straddling standpoint. They made the decision, they told everybody the decision, and they went. The second client example is a company that does heat treating services here in Ohio. And what they did is they decided, hey, we need to diversify. We can't only keep our certain government contracts or other contracts that we have. We need to diversify into some of this non-heat treating revenue. And so they empowered one of their team members to say, hey, step up, get us a bunch of examples of machines and things that we could buy. And some of those machines are tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's a huge investment to make. And that had been going on for years and years with them. And what they actually did is empowered somebody to say, you know what, you make a decision, you bring this to the table, and we'll make a decision as a leadership team, but we're actually going to put some skin in the game by buying the tooling for one of those processes that you recommend. So that's showing that they're not just talking about discussing, should we do something in the future? They're making it happen now by putting skin in the game. And those are a couple examples of getting off that fence. So the third tool from an organizational standpoint, especially if you're in HR, I think it may be helpful, is this idea of an outside-in HR transformation model. So if you think about traditional HR, is, we want to fix our HR department, we want to rewrite our policies, we want to look at the organizational chart, and then push that out to the rest of the organization. And in some cases, it aligns with what the strategic and actual business objectives of the company are, and sometimes it doesn't. Well, this model flips it on its head. It's from a book called HR Transformation, written by David Ulrich in 2009. And the model flips things on its head. It says, number one, from an HR standpoint, you need to have a seat at the table within your organization to understand what those business objectives are first, and then determine what the outcomes are needed, and then work your way back from there and adjust our HR policies, recruit talent, engage the talent accordingly based on those company objectives first. So no longer would HR be operating in a silo. And I don't know if this applies to anybody on here, then I hope it's really valuable for you. But that's a shift in my own thinking after understanding that is, if we're thinking about, well, I just want to add another person to my department because everybody's busy, first we've got to determine, is this in line with the objectives of the organization first? Otherwise, we could be executing in the wrong direction and it could hurt us more than it helps us. Quick example related to that HR transformation context. Right now, we have a client where salespeople need to sell products and they want to be flexible for their customers. This client is in manufacturing as well. But operations wants predictability of their scheduling, of how fast they need to get things out the door, and then delivery. They unfortunately cannot go back in time. So if they're delivering something a day or two late, there's nothing they can do about that, and that causes stress and hardship on a lot of customers. And in turn, it causes friction within the organization between sales and operations. And if you're a business leader right now, you're probably saying this is a tale as old as time. Sales and operations and even delivery facilities not always seeing eye to eye. Well, the objectives here, if you're thinking HR transformation as a whole company, that's the context. The objectives are, well, as a result of this friction, they want to reduce that friction. They want to reduce the delivery times. They want to make it more predictable, and they want sales, operations, and delivery to get along a lot better. And at the very least, have an understanding of where each other is coming from so they can be more forgiving. They can have each other's back a little bit more. Instead of seeing each other as their opponent, see each other as their teammate. And so part of the HR redesign is to invest in communication across those departments on a regular basis, once a quarter, to get those different departments together and make sure that they're all fully in alignment and getting to hash out some of the issues and some of the things that they just have at odds with each other, and resolve those and move on. They're also investing in team building on a regular basis, both internally and hiring a company like us to make sure that people are on the same page and at the very least have an opportunity to say what they want to say in any given situation. So that for me is the organizational constant. Now, what I want to do right now is I want to share a video with you, which is one of my favorite videos when it comes to motivation. One of my favorite videos when it comes to, the opportunity we all have to be an individual, to be a great individual contributor of our own culture, to help write our own story as it relates to our team and our culture. And it's a video by former Navy SEAL who wrote the book Extreme Ownership. And if you've ever read that book, one of my favorite books about accountability. It's amazing the power of being the most accountable person in the room. And this basically, I think, fits perfectly when we're talking about your ability to influence a culture positively. And basically, it makes the case that in any issue you have, right, we can view that issue as something that's overwhelming, something that's debilitating, or we can view that issue as an opportunity to learn something, to be more proactive next time, or to get better next time. So I'm going to go ahead and share this video with you. It's about 2 minutes long. If nothing else is going to fire you up in the middle of a lunch day or in the middle of a lunchtime webinar, this is
one of my direct subordinates, one of my guys that worked for me. He would call me up or pull me aside with some major problem, some issue that was going on, and he'd say, "Boss, we got this and that and the other thing." And I'd look at him and I'd say, "Good." And finally one day he was telling me about some issue that he was having, some problem, and he said, "I already know what you're going to say." And I said, "Well, what am I going to say?" He said, "You're going to say good." He said, "That's what you always say. When something is wrong and going bad, you always just look at me and say good." And I said, "Well, yeah, when things are going bad, there's going to be some good that's going to come from it. Didn't get the new high-speed gear we wanted? Good. Didn't get promoted? Good. More time to get better. Oh, mission got canceled? Good. We can focus on another one. Didn't get funded. Didn't get the job you wanted? Got injured. Sprained my ankle. Got tapped out? Good. Got beat? Good. You learned. Unexpected problems? Good. We have the opportunity to figure out a solution. That's it. When things are going bad, don't get all bummed out, don't get startled, don't get frustrated. If you can say the word good, guess what? It means you're still alive. It means you're still breathing. And if you're still breathing, well, then hell, you still got some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, and go out on the attack.
So I don't know about anybody else, but it's hard for me to watch that and not get excited and not start thinking about, just how pumped up, I can be, and how you can take any situation and think about it as something that's happening to you, or think about it as an opportunity for you to be proactive next time. And it really stems, that extreme ownership concept stemmed from a major mishap that Jocko and his team had when they were operating in Iraq, and he was a commander of an operation, and things went horribly wrong, and he had a decision to make. Do I try to point fingers at everybody else and try to save myself, or do I take full accountability for exactly what happened, even though it wasn't really all his fault? And what he did is he took complete 100% accountability and said, you know what, if there's any consequences coming down, they need to come down on me. And that actually gained him more respect from everyone in the room. It also encouraged other people to step up and say, no, it wasn't your fault. We had a responsibility in this, and we had a responsibility in this as well. And what the conversation turned into was, how do we avoid this ever happening again? So it turned into a proactive conversation. Instead of fingers pointing all over the room, they went back to collaborating, and everybody stepped up and took accountability because one person was the most accountable person in the room. So that I thought was a great way to start this idea of the individual culture constant. So as individuals, we can do this ourselves, but we can also help people on our teams to get better in these areas as well, to be that positive influence on the culture. But when it comes to a leader or an HR person, if you want to share this with your team, these are 3 tools that I think may be helpful to share and coach somebody through. The first one is habits. If we're working in difficult circumstances, if we're working from home, if we have a hybrid team, an all remote team, or even if you have people that are in the office now, I was thinking about this from my own context. We're going back in the office more frequently right now. And we have a small team under 10 people. But when there's people in the office, a lot of us have been so starved for human connection in person that we're finding ourselves tempted to just sit by each other's desk and just chat for 30 minutes at a time when we still need to get work done. And so there's habits involved there. And hey, I need to focus for this next 60 minutes, and then I'll take a 5-minute break and we can chat. So there's things even regarding working back in the office that we can improve as far as habits. And to be honest, everybody can improve their habits. I wanted to share a brief tool with you about habits. So if you have anybody that you feel like is struggling right now, is feeling a little bit lost, needs a little bit of direction or routine, here is a quick example of breaking your week down into 5 buckets, those being family, good habits, work, home care, and helping out somebody else. I'm not going to go through this whole thing out of respect for everyone's time, but I will send this out in advance, after the meeting, and anyone who's interested can take a look at it, or I can talk further about it in more detail. But this is one example of, hey, if you want to break down every week so that you feel like you're in a good routine, here's an example of doing that. The other thing I wanted to mention related to habits is this idea of stacking habits. One of my favorite books about habits is Atomic Habits, written by James Clear. And in it, there's a simple concept where you take something that you do every day or every week, and right before or right after that habit that you already do, you add one thing onto that habit. So for example, if you're in sales every day, most of us eat lunch somewhere around the middle of the day. Hopefully some of you are eating right now. All right. So if you want to stack a habit onto that, if you're in sales and you want to say, before I eat lunch every day, when I'm ready to eat, I'm going to make 2 phone calls to prospects, customers, current clients, whatever the parties are. I'm going to make 2 phone calls before I give myself the opportunity to eat. That is an example of stacking a habit onto something you already do. So you could get in the habit then of every day, okay, I know it's lunchtime, I'm hungry, I'm ready to eat, got to make my 2 phone calls really quick. It could have to do with time management. It could have to do with productivity. It could even have to do with exercise. If you think about every day, if you're coming home from the office, or even if you're working from home, you could simulate coming home from the office by walking into your foyer or your lobby at home. All right. Every day when I come home, I take my shoes off. That's the first thing I do when I walk in the house. All right. That is a habit that I do every day, no matter what. All right. But if I sit down, the chances of me working out immediately and having an exercise right after I get home diminish significantly if I sit down first. So if you stack every day I come home and take off my shoes, with immediately after I take off my shoes, I will change into my workout gear, the chances of you working out go up dramatically. So before I sit down, but after I take off my shoes, I am going to put on my workout gear. That is an example of stacking a habit on top. I highly recommend Atomic Habits, the book, if you're interested in that any further. So number 1 is about habits. Number 2 is one-to-one coaching. And this is something that you can do for your own team, or you can bring in a third party to facilitate for you. But from a culture standpoint, nothing tells somebody that you're willing to invest in them more than either you spending your time with them to coach them through something, or investing in a third party to help do that for you as well, to invest in their success. So our criteria for coaching is if somebody is stuck in some way and needs to get unstuck. And a lot of times, some of our clients in the past year have been people that are now working remote, who have never worked remote before, who need to get unstuck. And by that, they mean they need to create a great routine or create great habits working from that remote location. Number 2 is somebody's got momentum and you want to continue to gain this momentum. You want them to continue to be challenged, to make sure that they know that there's mobility for them. There's a plan for them moving forward. Number 3 is they're an A player. They are doing awesome, and you want to help them find that next gear of performance for themselves. So those criteria for us: get unstuck, gain momentum, and accelerate performance. We coach people, and we encourage you to coach through a very simple model that makes the acronym GROW. We've adopted it and adjusted it a little bit for our purposes, but it essentially stands for goal, reality, options, and will. Establishing his goal is what do you want to get out of this relationship? What does the next gear look like for you? What does unstuck look like for you? And then what is the reality in which you are operating? These are some of the obstacles that are holding you back, but also some of the resources at your disposal. And then once you've determined those parameters, that reality, then what are your options? What could you be doing? Believe it or not, if somebody gets stuck and they don't know what their options are, the question I'll ask a lot of times is, well, what advice would you give to a friend who is going through the same situation? And believe it or not, that tends to open up some more ideas from them if you're thinking of it outside of your own self, but giving somebody else advice. And then the last step is will. So this is, given all the options that you could do to get closer to your goal, here's what you will do. And this is typically 1 to 3 pieces of homework or commitments they are willing to commit to doing to get closer to where they really want to be. And then between this conversation and the next coaching conversation, they have that time to execute those commitments. Then they have to come back and report those to you and go back through the model for more conversations. This coaching is really effective, and we've seen some awesome results with some of our clients. And honestly, it can be done internally just like it can be done externally. So a couple client examples. I mentioned the remote habits. A couple of our clients actually, from an individual standpoint, they challenged each other to a book club and wanted to maintain connection. And that was a way that each person individually could hold each other accountable to continuing professional development and to stay connected as a team throughout the pandemic. So the last individual tool I want to share with you is an evaluation tool for people, and it's called an effort grid. And I'm going to share exactly what it means here in just a second. But I want to let you know too that this tool can be used for actually investing in people and making sure that you're helping them get where they want to go. It's basically a coaching tool as well as an evaluation tool. So what it means is there is talent on one axis and effort on the other axis. The best employees we have, you would consider to be high talent, high effort employees. They're the number one employees or team members we have. So if you think about on your team right now, who would you put in that top right-hand category? All right, those are the people that are they call them the golden eagles in this self-management, the self-management concept that this came from. But those are the people that deserve your time as a leader. They're the people also that need more challenge. They need to find that next gear. They always want to be improving. They're the people, if you felt like you haven't been able to go on vacation in a long time, they're the people you would put in charge, or you would feel comfortable making sure that they're keeping the trains running on time when you leave. All right, the second best employees we typically have are the number twos. All right, they have a lot of effort, they give a ton of effort, but they are not as talented, or there's a gap somewhere in capacity. They either don't have the training, they don't have the natural skill or talent, they don't have the experience, they don't have the education, but they're coachable. They're willing to give you everything they have. They'll show up early, they'll stay late to do whatever you need to do. This is an opportunity to evaluate people who fit into that part of the spectrum and let them know, hey, I want to invest in training for you. I want to invest more of my time. I want to ask you what your goals are, what your objectives are, where you think your next level or your next gear of performance is, and then I want to help you get there because they're worth the investment. The most frustrating people that we work with typically are on the top left-hand corner. These people have a lot of talent, but they don't give a lot of effort for whatever reason. In some cases, the people feel lost because they're extroverts this year and they're forced to work remotely, so they're not giving you as much effort as they were before, or a number of excuses, or they're not playing to their strengths, or they're the right person but they're not in the right spot within the organization, or they're frustrated in some regard, or they're not getting communicated with as well as they feel like they should, and so therefore you're not getting the most out of these people. That is a perfect opportunity to have conversations around what they feel like their purpose is, what would be more of a challenge to them, or to intentionally let them know that, hey, I feel like you have a ton of talent. We're not getting everything we can out of you. How do I help you move to the right side of this graph? In the bottom left-hand corner, of course, low talent, low effort. Those are difficult employees to have within your organization. Most of us would probably say those type of employees don't belong in our organization. But if you have them, what we want to do first is move them to the right side, inspire them to more effort, be really crystal clear about, hey, here's what you need to do on a daily and weekly basis. As a baseline, we're going to move you to the right side first and then try to move you to that top right-hand corner. So this is the effort grid. A couple examples of clients using this information to their advantage. We have an accounting firm client that has several layers of managers. And when the managers have people that they're managing, especially during an audit or a tax season, like they're trying to grow their people by helping them achieve the right amount of autonomy. When I say autonomy, I'm talking about flexibility or freedom to do their job without people looking over their shoulder. Typically, people want autonomy. It helps them grow. It helps them feel more like a leader, more like a contributor to the organization. And it's better for the managers as well, because that way they don't have to have their hands all over every single thing. It's more difficult typically to delegate things when we're virtual, because I can't walk up to somebody's desk and say, hey, oh, I just thought of this, this, and this. That's why an operating system is so important. That's why on an individual level, if you're an HR leader or you're a leader of an organization, think about where those opportunities might be to delegate more of the tasks that really you should not be doing, or you might not consider high value activities for your position that someone else could be doing. And it would also make them feel empowered if they were to take those over from you. And all of this is in pursuit of not only you operating in your wheelhouse or your area of strength, but helping your employees and your team members do the same. Because the closer we can all get to operating where we are really good and where we enjoy, the more productive and the happier we are going to be. So a tool like the effort grid can help answer some of those questions as to where do people fall in this line, and what are some of the reasons for that? Do they not have the right amount of autonomy now? Are they not, do they feel like they're on an island if they have too much autonomy? Do they feel like they're getting micromanaged if they don't have any autonomy? Like, are you not delegating well as a leader? And is that hindering their progress and causing some inaction or lack of effort on their part? Or are they just not in their wheelhouse? And as a leader, what can you do to help them get to that wheelhouse area? So those are a couple individual tools that may be helpful. And the last one here is the process constant. And this is from a culture standpoint, what I've noticed is that I appreciate, and a lot of our clients appreciate, just knowing that there is a process and it is an ongoing communication and ongoing, hey, we're trying things, we're working on things. We care about the team, the culture. We care about the success of not only our organization, but you individually as well. Following a process and having that consistent is just as important as doing it in the first place. So a quick example for one of our clients is, they said early on this quote, nobody needs to miss meetings, as long as they're still healthy enough to work. Even if people are at home, we're going to figure out the technology. If people are half and half, we're going to figure that out. But not only that, some of our clients have taken it upon themselves to identify individuals to own every meeting. And what I mean by that is when we're virtual and we're half virtual, half in the office, it is easy to get caught up into starting a meeting 10 minutes late because somebody's not on, because the technology didn't work, because I forgot about it until 2 minutes before the meeting, and then I'm hurrying to set everything up. People don't have their information loaded into our software, or they don't have their scorecard numbers ready, or they don't know, what the big issues are to talk about. If we have people that step up and own meetings and make sure that, hey, 5 minutes before the meeting, I want everybody to be on who's going to be virtual, to make sure your technology works, so we're not testing our audio right at the beginning of the meeting and holding everything up, making sure people are prepared at those meetings. The idea of an owner to a meeting is empowering to somebody, but it also makes sure those meetings are going to be a lot more effective and will actually start on time. Maybe that's just a pet peeve of mine. Integrating new team members. This is something we've heard from a lot of clients, especially in this remote environment or partially remote environment, is how do we make sure people feel like they're part of the team? And not only that, but they're confident in their job and they can hit the ground running. Here's a 3-step process that works for us and we've seen work for some of our clients. Number one, provide crystal clear expectations, especially if somebody is going to be remote. Hey, here's what we expect you to do. And I know all of you, I'm sure, have onboarding checklists and an onboarding process that works really well. All right, but if you feel like there's any gap or anything slipping through the cracks related to expectations of how they can be successful on day one, the first week, the first month and beyond, this might be an opportunity to rewrite some of those. Number two is allowing people to give you a sense of what their routine would look like and what they feel like is their great routine for working once they start with your organization. And you can tell them your opinion about what their routine should be, and then discuss where those gaps are or where you guys need to put your heads together. You might even learn things from the new people on your team as far as little hacks or things that work well for their routine. Number three is give people an easy button to ask for help. One of the hardest things to do, and it takes a great level of humility, especially when you're brand new. You want to seem like you've got the answers, but there are things that you just don't know if you're starting with a new team. And it can be one of the most disengaging things if you feel like you don't know what you're supposed to be doing and you're not exactly sure who to ask, or you just don't feel comfortable asking because somebody's unapproachable or because you're not sure who the right point of contact is to ask for help. Give those people an easy button. So one example of this is once a week checking in with any of your newer team members and letting them know, hey, I want to hear one thing that you feel like is working and one question you have. Everybody has to come up with one question. Or, hey, I want to know one point of clarity you need to help you do your job better. And I want you to give me one every week. And that gives them an outlet and almost an expectation that when they need help, they need to ask for help, because it's really not a weakness to ask for help. We think it's a strength to be vulnerable enough to do that. But as a new team member, especially remotely, it can feel like you're on your own sometimes. And this is an opportunity to nip that in the bud and to be proactive about that from a leadership perspective. So quick examples of this idea of making people feel like they're still part of the team, to continue to follow the processes that you used to follow when we were all in person. One of our clients replicates their Friday lunch. They used to do a Friday lunch with their team every week, and they replicated it at home by continuing to follow that process, not changing the time, not saying, hey, it's now optional, making it mandatory, but they ship individual lunches either via, a DoorDash kind of service or something like that. They ship the individual lunches to their remote team members as if it was catered together. So they have the Friday lunch just like they used to. They're following that same process, and everybody's still eating lunch together. They're just doing so in different locations. Some clients even will ship a $10 gift card, for each of these Friday lunches or any of these regular scheduled lunches, so that people can be eating together and keep things consistent, continue to follow their process. Cross-training and bench building is the second really and the third tool from a process standpoint for us. And if you think about adjustments we've never had to make before, those are quarantine adjustments. If somebody comes down, with COVID and they need to be out of your office for 7 to 10 to 14 days or completely out of commission, how do we adjust for that as an organization? If you have a process for that by now, which probably many of you do, that's great. I might continue to look at, where can we continue to build depth so that we can cover somebody if they're out. We have several manufacturing clients. Some of them will say, hey, if our welder goes down, we either have to shut down the welding station, which shuts down a lot of our jobs, or we need to have backups for that person. We need to have an assistant, but if the assistant's exposed to the person who actually tested positive, then what do we do? And so there's all these layers of adjustments you can make, and the better your process can be to cross-train other people and to just have contingencies to answer, what do we do if this happens, and this happens, the less inefficiency you're going to find and the better you're going to be off. The second part is ideal bench characteristics. So one of our clients is really into building their bench, and there's a lot of sales managers within the organization. There's a lot of sales reps within that organization, and they talk a lot about, how do I build the ideal manager or build this bench of people that I can count on, whether they want to be a manager or they just want to be the best salesperson ever, or whether they're toward the end of their career and they just want to be a mentor to leave a big legacy for other people. Like, one of the ways that we can identify, who can we really count on is by listing the characteristics that we value in their position. So if you were to make the ideal player in any of your positions, what would some of those characteristics be? Would it be they're really humble, willing to do anything, that you can always count on them to show up, they're reliable? Are they great in front of a customer? Are they motivated? Do they have this attitude where it's always a yes, I'll figure it out, or I'll try it? Or are they saying, well, no, it's not my job? Whatever those characteristics are, the better we can get those down on paper into black and white, the better we can evaluate our team and say, okay, who jumps out right away when I list off these characteristics? So if it comes to documenting processes and you feel like you need an upgrade, or you just want to simplify it a little bit, the process we use is, number one, simply identify what are the processes that need either completed or need innovated or need started from scratch. Then document them in painstaking detail, step by step, and ask yourself, okay, could I hand this to somebody that doesn't have much experience with our company, and would they still be able to understand and follow this process? If the answer is no, keep working on it and keep filling in those gaps. And then package and communicate. Some of us package them digitally, some of us package them in binders, but whatever it is, ensure that you're actually using them. And maybe the most important part of all is to communicate those over and over communicate them. All right, if it's something you need people to be following, over communicate, and not just the what and here's how to do it and who's responsible, but the why. Any decisions that are made, any processes that are going to innovate, especially if they're going to upset somebody's status quo or way of doing things, they need to be communicated in a crystal clear fashion over and over and over. We say to companies that a lot of people haven't really heard something until they've heard it 7 times. It doesn't really sink in until they've gotten it 7 times. And that might seem like incredible overkill, but a lot of our clients over the last 10 years have literally communicated messages to people once a month or once a week or once a quarter till they get to 7 times. And after the 5th or 6th time, people realize they're picking up new information about the message just about every time they hear it. And I'm always one who would much prefer to over communicate than under communicate. So that client that I mentioned that was really into building their bench, They actually built a bench lineup per manager, and they answered these questions among a couple others. Who's the person that sticks out to me right now that embodies the most ideal bench player characteristics? Who would be the most likely to be a manager? Who's the most likely not necessarily to be a great manager, but to break sales records? Who's the most likely to be a great mentor of others? And who are our subject matter experts? If you break your job down into specific parts of the job, who are those subject matter experts? A separate client I just wanted to briefly mention, they have to communicate really, really effectively across departments. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. And so they've created a team called their next gen team. These are the next layer down from the leadership team that they feel like someday these are going to be the next generation of our leadership team. And they've engaged that group of 7 individuals, all from different departments within the organization, that they feel need to get together once a quarter to go through a full day of meetings and facilitated conversations so that they can empower themselves and also be there to communicate with the rest of the organization, make sure the communication is flowing across departments as well. So the next gen team, that's working out well for them as well. So a quick recap from an organizational constant, we want to lean on an operating system. If you haven't heard of EOS, I'd encourage you to look into it as an operating system. Avoid that strategy straddling temptation and win outside in from an HR perspective. Individual constant, review your own habits and help others on your team with their habits. You could even as simply as send an email to everybody who's reporting to you right now and just say, hey, I want to ask you about, one habit you'd like to stack either before or after your, something you're already doing. Let me help you with that, or let me present to you on this concept. One-to-one coaching can be done inside and outside the firm, and the effort grid as an evaluation and coaching tool. The process constant, is integrating new team members and making sure that's great. Remember, give them the easy button, process for depth building and cross-training, and over-communicate any decisions that are made. If you're interested, anybody after this, I'd like to make an offer that if it's yourself or somebody within your organization right now, you feel like needs to get unstuck in some way, they're a great employee, great leader, or it's yourself where you feel like you're stuck and need to get that, get out of the mud a little bit, that might be an opportunity to engage a coach. And if you also have somebody, or it's yourself, that needs to find your next gear of performance, I'm willing to offer a free hour of my time to coach you through that grow model, have some commitments coming out of that conversation with no obligation, no strings attached. So feel free to just email me, pete@cultureshoc.com, if that's something you're interested in. Otherwise, Danny, I'm ready for some questions, and thank you everybody for listening and for spending lunchtime with us.
Pete, amazing presentation. Nice job. Thank you so much. And that offer of the 1 hour coaching, we use Pete with one-on-one coaching we did this year, and it was a phenomenal experience for an employee here. So highly recommend you take up that opportunity with him. We did have one question, Pete, from Brian. He said, meeting ownership is so important. How do you determine who should be the owner? Should it always be the same person or share the wealth?
Yeah, it's a great question. One thought is to ask anyone to volunteer. So if you ask people in a room or in a meeting, hey, who would like to be the meeting owner for the next month? You can go that route and see if somebody steps up immediately, because usually the more enthusiastic people are, when you ask that question, are going to do the best job at being the meeting owner. But also, if you have somebody that you feel like is not participating very much in meetings, that might be an opportunity for you to say, hey, why don't you be the meeting owner, and see if they can increase their ownership and their participation, because they have to be the person who's running the show. I would recommend doing it month by month. If you're doing a weekly meeting, if it's a daily meeting, week by week, and then giving someone else at the end of each month an opportunity to be the new meeting owner, just so that you're spreading around that ownership and encouraging everybody to want to take ownership. But over time, if it's, if somebody falls into that role because they're doing such a great job, and the rest of the team is in agreement that they're the best person to own that meeting, then you can stick with somebody longer term.
I love that. He says, thank you. Great ideas.
Sure. Thank you.
Grace says, have you presented to college students? how to determine the culture of a prospective employer in an interview, or how to navigate tough conversations, or different topics like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have I've done some one-on-one with college students to talk to them about actually working through the coaching model to help them try to get a job. To determine the objective is get a job. Part of the reality check is, well, I don't have a job, but here are my resources. Here are the people I know. Some of the options are get mock interview practice to apply for so many jobs per day. I have one client I'm working with right now whose responsibility is 2 hours a day of full productivity to applying for jobs and to reaching out to former contacts of his at internships. And then the will is the commitment to, hey, here's what you're going to commit to doing between now and the next conversation. I will say we have spoken to a couple athletic departments of colleges. So I did a goal setting session for John Carroll University's wrestling team a couple years ago and talked about, hey, before you graduate, what are things that you want to accomplish athletic wise, academically, and even socially? And there are a lot of kids who are 18, 19, 20 years old, probably never thinking about that before, just saying, I got to get through this week, or I got to get through this semester. But we had people talking about, I want to master this new move in wrestling by the next year. And so then the question was, okay, well, what do you need to do in the next 90 days to master that move within a year? And then what do you need to do in the next week to be on pace to be on pace for that 90-day, and so on and so forth. So we have done this for a few different colleges and mostly from an athletic perspective. But we have introduced EOS recently to a couple different departments within small colleges who are looking to shake up their strategy a little bit and get a little bit more entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Thank you. I have a question for you really quickly. I know we have a couple minutes. From the concept of the operating system, I know a lot of people have heard about the entrepreneurial operating system, but let's say an organization is interested in learning about it, but may not be ready to make the investment from having somebody lead them through it. What's your suggestion on them getting started on kind of building or getting to know an operating system and think about it for their organization?
If you're looking to get started, you're intrigued by the idea, I'd recommend reading one of the two following books. One is called Traction. The second is Get a Grip. Traction has the nuts and bolts of EOS as an operating system. And we've actually had several clients, we call them self-implementers, where they're implementing themselves and they're taking some or all of the tools. So that's a great book for companies that, at least for the short term, they want to self-implement or they can want to cherry pick a couple tools here and there. That's a great book that has those individual tools and nuts and bolts and how they all work together. Get a Grip is a narrative that basically tells a story of a small business who's stressed, who's not getting things done, who has very little accountability, and then they implement this process and it turns their organization around. So that's a little more of an interesting read. If you're more analytical, then definitely Traction. But I believe there are resources online as well for self-implementers, and there are workshops that are available. We've hosted some workshops in the past on that. We may again in the future, as soon as we can get a big group of people back together. But I would research self-implementers for EOS in addition to reading one or both of those books.
Yeah. Okay. Great suggestions.
Or contact us, and we'll help you out as much as we can. We'll give you as much resources and advice as we can.
Great. Thank you. Well, thanks, Pete, for being here with us. And to everybody still on the call today, thank you for being here with us. I'm going to be following up with an email with all of the resources that Pete mentioned. I'll have links to those resources, book recommendations or tools. He's going to be sharing the weekly priority breakdown. If you want to send that to me, Pete, I can throw that in the email as well. You'll also get a copy of the recording. I saw Richard Hamlin asked for that. And yes, definitely, I will include the recording in the follow-up email along with the resources and Pete's contact information. So you have everything you need if you want to get in contact with Pete or have any questions around EOS. Feel free to reach out to us or CultureShoc. And we're happy to just share our experience with working with them as well. All right. Well, thank you. And I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your week. And we hope to see you at the next virtual speaker series, which will be February 25th. I believe. I'll send you the date and the time in the email as well. And that one will be on work-life balance. So, all right. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.